We're live. Uh,
Jesus. Just a second there. I'll check the
okay.
old monetizing buttons and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
click on show.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Medieval Buzz. I am Rachel from the Creative Contessa. Many of you know me as the Contessa, and this is Philip from Irish Medieval History. And today we're going to be talking in part at least, about the 15th century Irish ensemble that we are planning for Philip. So
Mm.
exciting times. Progress is being made at any rate. Philip, how are you this morning?
Grand. Yuki was rushing off the door as usual, so I literally just sat down now. I looked at the time; it was 27. I was like, "Oh God, I better turn on the laptop and set up there."
Yeah,
Rachel, you're rushing on your side as well. We went a lot more earlier than usual.
yeah. I have a lunch date today with a Korean friend of mine, a doctor
Mm.
who's starting a
Oh,
new position at a new hospital, and after that, she probably won't have much time for me. So, uh,
ah,
so yeah, we're
that's
going
nice.
early. Plus, who knows what we might reach a different demo, Philip. Some of those maybe night owls in Europe, and some of the people in the Americas who go to bed earlier. So who knows?
Yeah. It is getting a wee bit late now, though, in Ireland, so we might get one or two all right. People just
I'm
rolling into
I'm
bed.
I'm always I'm always shocked at the people who actually really do stay up late, even on a work night.
Yeah, it's true.
I see it. Like I get comments. I'll do a 2 p.m. live stream, and someone will say, "Hey, greetings from New York," and I'm like, "It's 1 a.m. in New York.
Yeah,
Why are you
yeah.
awake?"
Especially when people are stressed. I think the combination of the phone and people still being stressed
Oh
has
yeah,
them up until about like 2, 3 in the morning sometimes. Hey, Susan, how are you keeping? Any news?
Susan. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Good to see you all. Yeah, it's I have to say the smartphones have actually I was reading a study recently that
Mm,
has come to the conclusion that smartphones have definitely led to more sleep issues
mm,
because people are so addicted to them that they'll get into bed and then they'll stay on them for another hour or two.
mm.
And especially if they're not using the night screen feature, then the kind of light that's coming from the screen is actually disruptive to your endocrine system. And so it actually prevents you from getting quality sleep. So, as if the world weren't stressful enough, we're also doing it to ourselves. So that's fun. You still there, Philip? Anyone? Uh-oh. Did I freeze? Okay. Um, Philip seems to have
Yeah,
frozen.
yeah. My internet
You
slowed
there?
down
You
a bit.
back?
Sorry, a second. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
weird. Okay, that's fun. Yeah, you're great. I thought for a minute I thought
Oh,
I
it's
was
weird now.
actually dreaming and I was in, like a place where no one could hear me, but I can hear everyone else. Okay, great. Yeah,
No,
no
it's
news
my
on.
internet is acting up.
Oh, yeah, I can tell. I think there's a lag now, which is unfortunate. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so actually, yeah, so we were going to talk about Irish clothing today, and I've come to the conclusion, Philip, that we're really going to have to
Oh,
probably
it might
reach
be.
out to museums in Ireland, because they are so bad about digitizing their collections. And we're probably going to have to actually email some curators and see if they can give us some information about artifacts that are in their collections that I'm pretty certain haven't been
Mm,
published, haven't been promoted in any kind of way. Because you were talking about we need to look at belts and shoes and accessories for you, and
mm.
there's so little that has been published on those kinds of items from Ireland, and because of the bogs I cannot really believe that there aren't more. So
Yeah.
my suspicion is that they're in collections, they're in storage, and they're just not getting the kind of publicity they should, because as you said, the Irish museums are not exactly the wealthiest. So
Yeah, it's
they
true.
don't have tech bros donating millions of dollars to them to research and set up beautiful exhibits and whatnot.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So yeah, that's a good point to actually get in contact with the local museums and stuff and see what
Yeah,
they have. That
Yep.
seems like a good idea. But at least we can talk about the basic stuff because we have actually enough because of all the backing that you guys have given us. We do actually have enough money to get the Lena sorted. So at
Yep.
least we can get the Lena sorted,
We can.
which is, obviously very, very important for Irish culture and stuff as well, especially since
God's
we can
sake.
kilt that once we get the belt up and going.
What the hell just happened?
The sound went to, did it?
Okay, hold on a minute. My really.
Okay. I don't know what just happened. I touched my headset. It decided it needed to let me hear things I didn't need to hear.
The
Yeah.
joys.
Good evening, Misty. Thank you. Or good morning, wherever you are in the world. It's morning for us anyway in Asia. I'm actually live streaming from Daegu, South Korea, and Philip is live streaming from Okinawa.
Okinawa.
It's from the almost as
Mm.
far south in Japan as you can go and still count as Japan. So yeah.
Yeah, somehow. Because I was
Yes.
even, what was it called, talking about that this morning. How many people, there's more people here related to Philippines and Taiwan than there are to Japanese people,
Right.
which I just thought was funny because Japan is just so far away that it's actually way easier to get over to Taiwan and the Philippines than it is over to mainland Japan. The only time it gets really, really easy to travel over to mainland Japan is when, what was it called? Because you don't need a passport. That's the only difference.
Right.
You just need like a driving license or something. Even for myself, like I don't need a passport to get from Okinawa to mainland Japan, which is funny for a foreigner, but that's the way the rules are set because it's the same country that you can literally
Right.
just fly around with your driving license and you're sorted.
Yeah, in Europe, in Germany anyway, one has to have a an official an official ID card.
Yeah.
Driver's licenses in Germany are not official ID cards, so you
Mm.
actually have to, if you want to fly in Germany without your passport, you have to have an official ID card. Which, as
Yeah.
a foreigner, when I was living there, I couldn't get at that time. I wasn't eligible for that. So
Mm.
even to fly within Germany, I had to have a passport. And God knows to fly around Europe, I had to have a passport because I didn't
Yeah.
have that official EU approved ID that could count in lieu of a passport. But
Mm.
yeah, okay. So
Ireland.
Irish clothing. Good evening,
Mm.
everyone. So unfortunately, my headphones cut out when I think I suggested, "Oh, screw you." You know, ghosts in the machine, man. Ghosts in the machine. I don't know. I feel like this apartment was built on an ancient burial ground or something, and the and it would be aristocrats where our apartment is right now would have been where aristocrats would have been buried in the ancient Korean kingdoms. So they're
Mm.
probably particularly upset about
Yeah.
having a not particularly nice little apartment built on top of their top of their resting place.
Mm.
And anyway, yeah, so my microphone cut out when we were talking. I just suggested that we reach out to the Irish museums.
Mm.
And then you responded, but I don't know what you actually said to that. What did you say to that?
I just said that would be a really good idea, to be honest with you. And then we had
Yeah.
my internet decided to completely slow down. It's grand now; it's flying again. I can see the comments as well. People are asking there, can I see the comments? I can see
Yeah.
your comments. That's the main thing. I don't know if I can see anyone else's comments, but I can see your comments. So that's the main thing.
Yeah. So far I can see my comments. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, reaching out to the museum would actually be quite a good idea. We do have breathing space for the time being
We do.
because we do financially have enough resources to make the Lena, which is handy enough because from the Lena we can build on from that. We are aiming to have a 15th century Lena. Um, we were talking about before as well. I think one of the interesting things when tackling the Irish Lena will be if we can use saffron or not, because we've talked about this a few times, and it
Yeah.
seems like it's only in the later part of the 15th century, going into the 16th century, that we start to see saffron coming into Ireland. So, like, at what point can we start putting the old saffron onto the lei now,
Right.
Rachel?
Yeah, so I last night my I actually like to read things to help me go to sleep. So last night I was reading up on the sumptuary laws that were passed in Ireland, or well, specifically in the Pale,
Mm,
because and trying to find what resources I could that might talk about Ireland as a whole. I was actually trawling through the Ulster Annals, and then Philip, I started going through every digitized annal on which I could get my hands, which is actually a lot. For
mm,
those who don't know, many of the
yeah,
Irish annals of history have been digitized, and they're freely
yeah,
available through Cork University's website. I think it's they cleverly came up with
mm,
the backronym of like uh, Celt, CELT, but it stands for
yeah,
some, I forget exactly what it's, entire source text or something like that. Anyway,
yeah,
so you can actually go and look at and the translated versions, because that's the important part,
mm,
right? Like most people can't read old, middle, or early modern Irish in manuscript form. That's
yeah.
not that's not what most people can do. So these are translated and transcribed and digitized. So I was plowing through. I think I got through before I finally fell asleep with my phone on my chest. I fell asleep after about 12 of them, because I was looking for references to fabrics. I was looking for references to colors. I was looking for references to clothing.
Mm,
And I'll be honest, Philip, the only references to clothing I found in any of them were monks' robes. That's
yeah.
it. Otherwise, these annals didn't see fit to it. I guess clothing never played an important enough role to make it into any of these annals,
It's 'cause it's
except
monk.
for
Yeah.
the monks' robes.
Yeah, because these monks who are writing it with their biased
Yeah,
interpretation. Like, don't get me wrong, I do love the annals, but you
yeah,
can tell they're written by men who live up in the tower. Like, okay, so
yeah.
this is quite offensive to say, but like the incels of the early medieval period, locked up in the tower. He screams it a mile away. Like their interpretation of masculine men is very kind of like heathens and pagans, and
Yeah,
their opinion of women sometimes of like, well, she's a good innocent girl, but she's a bit of a bold evil one. You get those feelings from the literature at the time, which gives us a biased interpretation. Like when people have this interpretation of the medieval period, it is from those monks, like which were the
yeah,
incels of the day, and people seem to forget that. Like, and I think that's
yeah,
why when we watch movies and stuff, we think all of society was just a bunch of men with incel heads going around going, burn the women, when it's really just them monks who were writing the history books, that were
yeah,
up in the tower. So,
yeah.
yeah, I do love the annals, but yeah, a mile
It,
away, you can tell. Yeah, go on.
it's very frustrating because in other chroniclers from other parts of Europe in this same era always talk about clothing,
Mm,
because clothing was a sign of wealth and power. And so you can have chronicles where they could be describing a great ball that's happening, and the only thing they talk about is the clothing. They don't talk about the dancing.
mm,
Like, this is a ball, people are dancing, and all you have to say is that the men were dressed in silk and pearls.
yeah.
Okay, so it was very disappointing, Philip. I was very
It is.
disappointed.
It is, but you can, if you actually even look at the drawings and stuff that they do, it's always someone else describing it to them. Like you can tell that
Yeah,
the Irish monks are up in a tower or off in the coastal side. They're
yeah,
never where the main heat of the action is. Like, what was it called? Uh, they're never like at the action of the annals of Clonmacnoise or something, where they're in the middle of something, some great assembly or something. They're
right.
always some guy who's up in a, those Irish towers in the early medieval period, the early
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
towers. They're just called Irish towers, aren't they? And then you've got Irish tower houses. That's the difference. Yeah, my brain suddenly clicked. But you can always tell that they're just up in a tower, just writing away. They're
Right.
never in the heat of anything. Like,
No, they're not.
yeah,
And
uh,
so that also, so actually you mentioned that it's monks who are writing those annals, right? And
mm,
that's actually part of the reason that a lot of modern people think that that medieval people were repressed, right?
mm,
That they didn't engage in sex, that sex was taboo, that sexual interactions were forbidden, because
mm,
often the chronicles that inform that understanding are written, as you say,
Yeah.
by monks, or they're who are then recording sermons
Mm.
that are preaching against that kind of thing. But
Yes.
but what people forget is that you don't preach against something that's not happening,
Mm.
right? So Saint Bernardine, San Bernardino isn't standing in early 15th century Italy screaming at the top of his lungs about things that aren't happening. He's talking
Yeah.
about things that are happening
Mm.
and that he doesn't approve of them. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's part of it. We
It's
call that source bias, right? It's a
yeah,
source bias.
100%. It's not always like that. I would say, okay, in fairness, I would say 80% of them are kind of like the incels of their day,
Yeah. Oh
but
yeah.
there
Some of
is,
them were getting it on. Yeah.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. There's one story I have it here,
Oh yeah.
actually. I'll grab it there in a second. I've shown you this one before, but it talks about a monk, an Irish monk, who goes off and becomes a transsexual. And he takes part in homosexual deeds and all this. Oh yeah,
Right.
the case of, I've got it here actually. What was it called? The case of the abbot of Durnig of medieval Irish, story of sex change, by
Nice.
Tig, right? I have it here actually. I can show it to you guys later. But it talks about a monk who goes off and who becomes a transsexual. He goes from being a man to a woman. And it's
Oh, cool.
insanely interesting because in Irish society, it's still very kind of disgusting and weird. Like it's acceptable for a woman to want to be a man, but a man to want to be a woman because of the fact that he's having
Mm,
intercourse where he's the feminine one. That's
right.
that's
He's the
that's
bottom. Yeah, that's not
yes.
appropriate. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very, and this is what's strange about early medieval Ireland. When you have Vikings who commit SA on other men, as long as they're the dominant, that's
It's okay.
acceptable to a
It's
certain
okay.
to a
Yeah.
certain extent. But him wanting to have a sex change and be as you said there, the bottom, that's kind of not
Mm-mm.
acceptable in the in the literature. And he talks about this in the book. So it's insanely interesting that there is a monk who writes about this. You also have another monk as well who is joking to his other fellow monks about going to bathhouses with ladies of the nights in it, and joking about which one his favorite ones and stuff. So there is,
Jesus.
I would say, at least 20%, 40% of the monks that are, as you said, they're getting on and stuff. And what was it
I
called?
mean,
Then I
I
would
mean,
say,
there's all kinds of like there's
mm,
so many like Chaucer and Boccaccio in their collections of folk stories from their era. They're
yeah,
full of stories about monks and nuns getting freaky in the
mm,
cloisters and in the monasteries and in the convents, right?
yeah,
They're absolutely it's very clear that despite the supposed vows of chastity they should have taken or may have taken or did take, they often get ignored. And what's funny is there's a story by Boccaccio in which the nuns play this fantastic game of mental gymnastics to justify why it's okay to have sex with their gardener, because their
mm,
gardener is pretending to be deaf and mute.
yeah,
He's pretending, by the way.
yeah.
He pretended to be deaf and mute so that they would let him be their gardener and not feel threatened by him because he's a young, handsome man. And
Ah,
and because they think he's deaf and mute, they say to each other, well, he's deaf and mute, he's not really a man because he has these handicaps. So
mm,
if he's not really a man, then us doing things with him isn't really violating our vows, right?
mm,
So they it's like, wow, you really talked yourselves into that one, didn't you? So
mm,
yeah, I think there certainly were plenty of what I would call stodgy
mm,
Saudi members of the church, of the clergy, who, absolutely railed against, any kind of sexual activity that involved pleasure. But there were also plenty of examples of ones who not only didn't rail against it, they engaged in it. So,
mm. Just to
yeah.
answer Jim's question there, no, he doesn't lop off his sausage.
Oh, no, 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 no
He
surgery.
just, yeah.
Yeah.
He just dressed up as a woman for the day. He has a partner for the day as well, another male partner as well, and he spends the whole day, by the way, in his fantasy. It's a fantasy he's writing about where he dresses a woman and he role plays what it would be like to be in a marriage with his partner for the day,
Mm,
and then he goes back to being a monk. Like,
right.
remember, monks aren't supposed to be having relationships with women, never mind men. And
Yeah,
it is
yeah,
what he's doing. I'm not saying it's acceptable behavior because it's him becoming a woman. It is unacceptable, but it's interesting because it's not unacceptable the way we would see as unacceptable today. It's unacceptable because,
yeah,
as Rachel pointed out, he's a bottom, and people are like, "Oh, why would you demasculate yourself like
yeah,
that?" That's how
yeah,
people are writing, and he writes about it himself. He cannot understand how we can live in a society where wanting to be demasculated is seen as a negative thing. Like he writes about this
yeah.
in his book.
There's actually, do you remember what century that was?
This is, I'm going to quickly scan through because I can guarantee that I can find it fast, but it is around the 9th century.
Oh, very early, very
Yeah,
early.
it's
Interesting.
amazing stuff.
Because in 14th century
Sorry, I take that
England,
back. That's 11th century. That's
11th
11th
century,
century.
still
Yeah,
still pretty early. I mean, that's
yeah.
still, Middle Ages, not later, not high Middle Ages. So
Mm,
in 14th century England, there is a case of a man who is, of course, these terms don't apply. The terms we have now, the nuanced terminology that we have now for gender identity and sexual orientation, those terms don't exist in Middle English,
mm,
right, or medieval
yeah.
Latin or any of the medieval languages, really. But there is the case of an individual, I will say, named Eleanor Reichner, who is born as a man, like
Mm,
that's and and I'm going to say they because this individual transitions back and forth,
okay.
in according to the record, because they're brought up on charges,
Oh,
of
right.
prostitution, actually prostitution.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
and of illicit prostitution, so
Mm,
prostituting in an illegal manner, not in the places in the neighborhoods where it's allowed. So they get brought up on charges of that, and the deposition of their case actually delves into their sort of their trans history, I guess is how we might call it, of
mm,
how this person was a man, identified as a man, then started taking on the habit and customs of women, and actually became an embroideress,
mm.
in fact, while also doing sex work,
Yeah.
and then would also sometimes then resume the habit, as it's the terminology in the deposition, right?
Mm,
These aren't my words. This is the paraphrase deposition, right? They
mm,
assume the habit of a man, and then also engage in sex work that involves male clientele,
mm.
right? So, and then they also apparently, at the same time, there was some accusation, some implication that they were also engaging in sex work that involved women clientele as well.
Mm.
So, yeah, so this is Eleanor Reichner. It's a very interesting case because ultimately they are not found guilty. Actually, they're not charged. They don't face any punishment.
Mm.
So it's and the wording in the deposition is very neutral.
Yeah.
It's not inflammatory. It's not derogatory. It's not pejorative. So
Mm.
it is actually a very interesting window into 14th century English, gender and sexual identity, and how society at the time may have viewed it.
Mm.
Right. It's one of these rare cases where we can see that. But there are references to other communities. Community may be too broad a term, too big a term, because that maybe implies there were more individuals than there were, but small collectives anyway of trans individuals living together, and in some cases actually trans. There's accusations of a brothel, for instance, that is entirely staffed by trans individuals. And by trans, we're not talking about surgery.
Yeah.
No gender confirmation surgery. For one, while they, believe it or not, Philip, they did do plastic surgery in the Middle Ages. They
Okay.
really did, and
Yeah.
people actually survived. There's women. We have records of women who got breast reductions
Mm.
because their breasts were too big and they wanted to have cute perky breasts because that was what was attractive in the medieval aesthetic. And we have records of people having their hair lip, maybe that's pejorative, having a cleft palate. Do you know what a cleft palate is?
Yeah. I have a friend who has it.
Yeah, they have it. They used to do cleft palate repair surgery
Mm.
also. So imagine, ah, and then there's the case of Federico da Montefeltro, who took a lance to the eye in the middle of the 15th century in a joust,
Mm.
and it did a lot of damage to the eye socket. So we lost the eye, but because he was a puissant and powerful condottiero, basically a warlord, but a Renaissance prince warlord, so a very interesting combination. But he had lots of enemies, and he didn't want to be hindered by only being able to see out of one side of his face, basically. So he ordered his surgeons to remove the bridge of his nose while they were repairing his eye, so that he could see with the one good eye left through the other side. So if you look at his portrait, you can actually see there's this strange right angle going down from his forehead to the lower part of his nose. It's because he removed the bridge of his nose. So yes, they could have done that kind of plastic surgery, but in the case of the male genitalia, there's a lot of major blood vessels there, and I feel like that's a different level of plastic surgery than just fixing a cleft palate or removing the bridge of your nose.
Yeah, I was thinking about that last night as well, weirdly enough, because the fact I actually know so many ladyboys over in the village. By the way, just to be frank with you guys, I'm actually married to a woman, but I do actually have a lot of ladyboy friends up in the American village. I don't know if there's any, you were saying before about that over in Korea, but here in Okinawa, there's tons of them because there's a US Marine base just over the hill as well. So there's a lot of Marines that actually date the ladyboys over in American Village. And a lot of them, I don't know any of them that I've spoken to that have any surgery or anything up there. But I think it's just popular these days, as they call it, the joystick, to keep the joystick there. Because I was thinking about that last night, because there was another film that talked about those surgeries starting to happen in the 19th century. And I remember hearing about it as well in the 90s, of people having surgery down below. But these days, I don't hear about it much, to be honest with you. I hear most people popularizing the joystick. Like, I remember, this is actually a funny story. It happened 2 months ago, where I actually had a friend, not my friend, but I knew someone who went off with somebody who he actually thought was a lady boy, jumped into bed, and it was an actual woman, and he got mad and kicked her out of bed. Yeah, he wanted a joystick. He said he wanted a joystick. So I think it is popular these days to have, as they're calling it these days, a joystick for younger men. So I don't know, I mean,
I know some. I have some trans friends who have had that final level of gender confirmation surgery, but I also have trans friends and relatives even who don't want to go that route. I mean, it's a lot of nerves. There's a lot of nerve endings down there, and surgery. A lot can go wrong in a surgery that could leave you permanently numb, for instance, and that's not good. Unless I guess that's you want to have no tactile sensation. That would be So I think it, each individual kind of decides for themselves, and there's always a risk, right? Surgery always comes with a risk, and what a lot of people don't realize is that just going under anesthesia can actually result. It has like a 25% chance of resulting in actually some level of brain damage. So and I'm not talking about the kind that's going to leave you drooling, but the kind that will actually reduce your cognitive abilities, just enough that maybe you can't solve algebra equations in your head anymore, that kind of thing. So any surgery needs to be seriously considered at pros and cons. And God knows in the Middle Ages, their level, they had anesthesia. This is another of those myths about the Middle Ages. They had a form of anesthesia. They had a couple of different topical analgesics like clove oil, which is very effective, by the way. And for actual proper like narcosis, is that English? That's what they say in German. Anyway, to put you under, they had poppy juice from the opium poppy. But the problem is that the opium poppy, when you're just kind of going by poppy juice, the strength, it's almost impossible to know how strong poppy juice actually is. And so frequently patients would just fall into comas and not wake up again. So, or their breathing would stop.
Oh, geez, that's even worse.
Yeah. That's why I've said this before, I'll say it again. There's actually a surgery manual from, I think it's the Regimen Sanitatis Salernitum, which is supposedly a book of health and surgical practices and good best practices from this medical school in Salerno. And it actually says that if you use poppy juice for surgery, you need to slap your patient every hour really hard in the face so that they don't fall asleep too deeply.
Jesus.
So with that kind of risk to your surgery, maybe you decide you don't need to go to that level.
But like, it seems like people are already having a whole load of fun in Florence already, because I remember you were saying before that people were just paying fines in Florence. Because I remember when I was younger, I was like, how did Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci get away with being homosexual in Rome and Florence? And you turned around and were like, oh, they were just paying fines and just getting on with it. And I was
so there's the history of and I'm going to use this word from the medieval perspective because this is what it's called in the sources. The history of sodomy in Florence is a very interesting one. I actually have a fantastic book, a source book on 15th century Florentine society that's broken down with primary source readings on a variety of topics. And under crime and punishment, there's a whole series of cases about sodomy cases, like depositions from the trials themselves. And the thing is that someone ran the numbers, and something like 50% of all Florentine men in the 15th century faced sodomy charges at some point. Because what started happening is people started using the charge of sodomy as a political tool. So, like, I think the Medici even occasionally got accused of it by political enemies. So it became a political tool, but the trials were actually, it seems that the trials were not kangaroo courts. They really did listen to the evidence that was presented. They really did examine. It wasn't just oh, well, you've been accused, you're going to be executed now, because the penalty for being found guilty of sodomy was actually usually death. It was a capital crime. In most of Europe, it was late medieval Europe. It was a capital crime. And in fact, you were more likely to be burned at the stake for sodomy than you were for witchcraft in the Middle Ages. I know people don't want to hear that, but there it is. Depending on where you were. Again, your mileage may vary. Europe is not a monolith across the 1,000 years of the Middle Ages, neither across the 1,000 years nor geographically. But in 15th century Florence had such a reputation for sodomy that there was one verb in many languages in Europe that meant to have homosexual male sex, and that was to Florentine. To Florentine. Oh, you Florentined last night. That meant that it was you and another man, and you two got it on, right? So that's how, and that perception is not entirely political slander by Florence's enemies. I mean, we have to remember Florence was in the 15th century it was one of the wealthiest, most powerful polities in Europe from a mercantile perspective, right? So Florence controlled so much. The banking of Europe in the 15th century was controlled by Florence, right? So Florence certainly had a lot of detractors simply because it was rich and powerful. So we always have to take that into account when other people are writing about Florence from other parts of Europe and other parts of Italy. That could be them trying to present Florence in what in the 15th century would have been the worst possible light. That being said, there are plenty of court cases, depositions Florence has an amazing archive from the Middle Ages, amazing. And there are so many court cases that are all about sodomy, and some of them were found guilty. The evidence was pretty clear and they were put to death. So it could be a risk. It could have been a risk. You know, Florence's response was one to impose sodomy laws, but two and enforce them. Two was to found public brothels staffed
Mm.
by women,
Ah.
that that in the hopes that this would convert the men to back into being heterosexuals. That according
Mm.
to the phrasing in the Florentine texts is that, these men started on the righteous path of, of heterosexuality, but then because there were no women available, because all of the women were proper ladies and, good respectable daughters, and you can't just have sex with good respectable daughters and the members of society, female members of society. Well, they had to have gay sex because there was no alternative, right?
Mm.
But if we give them these brothels with these women that are clean and regulated, and the women are, get regular health exams to make sure that they're clean and healthy, then they will go back to being heterosexual. Like, they clearly didn't understand what homosexuality was, actually.
Mm.
But that was the hope. It didn't work, by the way. It did not work. The men did not go back to being heterosexual.
Yeah. Getting back into fashion again.
Yeah.
So we were talking about saffron. I'll just finish off the saffron part
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there's
No, actually,
another part of the. Go on.
saffron is a very interesting topic. Yeah, go on, go on.
I'll just talk about the saffron for a wee bit while poke and prod
Yep,
your brain for saffron.
yep.
And then I want to talk about just the edges of the Lena as well. And we can also talk about kilting because you guys, I know for a fact some of you guys will be mad into kilting again. Kilting it's a brilliant topic. I absolutely love talking about kilting, and I have
Yeah, I
no
do too.
problems talking about kilting, especially when it gives the actual correct history of what is a kilt
Yeah,
into the world. So we'll talk about saffron, then we'll talk about the edges of the Lena that happens in the 16th century for sure, and then we'll talk about kilting up the Lena. So the saffron bit, we were talking about it before, and from my understanding, it seems to start coming into starts to come from Spain and starts migrating up from the trade routes and stuff
yeah,
into Ireland into the 16th century.
right.
Remembering that in 1399, Ireland has had its Gaelic resurgence. It's, still considered under the administration of England as the Lordship of Ireland, but it's not. At this
Right,
point, it's
yeah,
under the administration of the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers
right.
and the Irish Parliament to a certain degree. But it's funny because no one's rocking up to the Irish Parliament, which makes me wonder if they're doing most of the administration at assemblies, that they're going to the assemblies instead and doing the administration there instead of rocking up to the Irish Parliament. Because anytime someone is summoned to the Irish Parliament, like traders and merchants, you think they'd be delighted because they'd be like, "Oh, I can finally have my speech." But instead, they're just coming up
Right.
with excuses and they're outright saying, I don't want to go to the Irish Parliament, which says to me that they're doing the administration at assemblies, which makes sense because the half of the most of the country, I'd say a good 70% of the country, is banned from the Irish Parliament in the 15th century. It's not until we get to the
Yeah,
16th century that we have Gaelic earls being allowed to go to the Irish Parliament. So it makes sense that most of the administration is done in the assemblies, but that's neither here nor there. I just wanted to tell people that by once we get into the 15th century, it's in reality it's Irish controlled. I know
yeah,
by paper, just like a lot of stuff, it's technically speaking under English administration. Yeah, okay, whatever.
yeah, yeah. It's not. It's really not. Like, the
Yeah.
range in the 15th century. England has um, ostensibly some control over the Pale, which
Yeah.
is a very small part of Ireland, really,
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
and and ostensibly some control, influence in the major coastal cities, right?
Mm.
Waterford, Wexford, Limerick, Cork. Like, there's some kind of something. Or Galway also. I was reading that Galway also was instituting. Curiously, was instituting or implementing English inspired sumptuary laws, I
They
guess
have
is what.
ideas in Galway. They have
Yeah,
ideas in Galway.
yeah,
Galway's like on the opposite side of Ireland, and it was built by the Gaelic Irish. Like all the other ones were built by the Scandinavians and was always somewhat linked to the wider world.
Right.
Galway was built by the Irish, and then they decide it was up around the 14th century when all this Gaelic resurgence and stuff is going off that they are the civilized English, and they start
Right.
writing letters to the King of England, going, "Us, they're Gaelic, by the way." And they go, "Us civilized English cannot understand these wild Irish outside
Right.
our gates. Can you come over and get rid of them? They're just barbarous people." And I was reading these letters going, "What the hell? You're all Gaelic. What are you doing role
Yeah.
playing as being English?"
And that would completely line up with the sumptuary laws I was reading. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I was asking myself, I'm like, what the frack is Galway doing? As you say, it's on the other side. It's like almost as far away from England as you can get and still
Yeah.
be in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
And yet they're passing these laws that talk about we must, if you want to enter the city, you must assume the English habit,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's like, what?
But this is what I find fucking hilarious, right? We talk about the Desmond Fitzgeralds, about a bunch of Anglo-Irish, what was it called, go around in these fine silk garments with bare feet on in the countryside.
Right.
Galway's even worse again, where it's a bunch of Gaelic native Irish people suddenly just walking around the place dressing English with
Yep.
fake English accents going, "Lordy da da, look at the uncivilized people outside the wall." It's like, what the hell am I reading here? Like, and these are the letters. They're writing these letters to the English king. And the English king just role plays back and says, yeah, I recognize you people as the civilized English people. And I'm like, and by the way, the English king cannot do anything. He cannot govern Galway. Like, Galway is doing this by itself.
Yeah.
When they're doing all this stuff, they're doing it independently from the King of England. Yet they're role playing that the King of England is ruling all of Ireland. And this is, by the way, this is the peak of the Gaelic resurgence, right? When Ireland has been like pretty much completely Gaelicized once again. And you just have the most, and Galway is the capital, pretty much the city capital of the most Gaelic area. And they decide, oh, we're going to be English now. It's like, what the hell are you guys doing? Everyone else has gone back to role playing to be Gaelic again. And you are deciding, oh, well, role playing is popular. And since everyone's role playing as being Gaelic, I'm going to role play as being English. And it's like, you are the Gaelic. What are you doing?
Yeah, so that thank you for giving me that context, because I was reading these sumptuary laws and I'm like, what is going on? Why is this happening in Galway? Because Galway was not in the Pale. It was not. As you say, the English in the 15th century have zero control over what is happening in Galway. England can't control what's happening in England in the 15th century, let alone what's happening outside of England. So you've got, you're absolutely right. So saffron actually, saffron, it's one of those things that has been, it's been transformed into a national, saffron dyed clothing has been, and I assume this probably happened really heavily at the end of the 19th century. It's been transformed as the symbol of Irishness, right? A sartorial symbol of Irishness. The yellow, that bright yellow shirt. The thing about saffron, though, in the Middle Ages, no matter where you were, just as today, Philip, have you ever bought a bottle of saffron from the store? Just for
I haven't
cooking?
bought it, but it was Claire that actually bought it from me and actually applied it herself. She loved it.
But I'm talking about the price. Yeah. Saffron is insanely expensive. It is, because even now, with all of our technology, we still don't have a way to really mechanize its production and harvest, and then its post-harvest production into something that goes into a bottle that you then take home, because it's the stamina of a crocus, a delicate little flower, and so humans have to go and pick them delicately, carefully, by hand, and then they have to be processed carefully, delicately dried by hand, and then carefully, delicately put in bottles by hand. So saffron is very expensive, not only because you don't get much saffron from one crocus, you get 2 strands of saffron per crocus.
Oh, wow.
and as far as I know, each crocus bulb only blooms once a year, as far as I know. So, but that was true in the Middle Ages as well. So saffron is insanely expensive. And the amount of saffron that you need to dye an entire let's say shirt, Elena, as they're called in Irish, the amount of saffron you need is quite a bit. So it would have been insanely expensive to dye a shirt that way, which means that not many Irish people could have afforded that.
Yeah.
Couldn't have. Could not have. What they could have afforded, however, there are plenty of other weeds that grow in Ireland that produce yellow. And so you could absolutely use those other weeds to produce a yellow. Would that yellow be as rich as saffron? No. No. But it would be affordable. So, you know, the idea of it being saffron, that's going to be, as far as we can tell, that's a later medieval development. I have not found any records of saffron dye being used in the earlier Middle Ages. If anyone out there has, and I mean a primary source, please. Archaeological evidence, a chronicle, one of these stupid annals that never annals. Jesus, annals. Wow.
No, Rachel, you're gonna get banned.
I know, right? One of those ruddy annals that doesn't actually provide any information about clothing, as far as I can tell. If any of you have actual primary source evidence of saffron being used before the 15th century in Ireland, I would love to see it, but I haven't seen it. What I have seen, though, Philip, in the 15th century, Edward IV issues a series of sumptuary laws, not just for Ireland, by the way. He issues a series of sumptuary laws for all of the English domain, shall we say, and not just covering men's clothing, covering women's clothing, covering foodstuffs, because people are increasingly spending too much money on things, more money than they should, more money than they can, and they're ending up in debt. So the idea, and in some cases, and then in the other case, people are dressing above their station, right? So that's a problem. So Edward IV passes a whole bunch of laws, and amongst them, there are laws that apply to the Lordship of Ireland, in quotes, which in this era, as you've said, that's basically the Pale, which is basically Dublin and some area around Dublin. It's not a particularly large geographical area at this point. But what he says is that one of the things that is passed is that kerchiefs, and it's for women. They don't talk about men's clothing. It's about women's clothing. They say that women are not allowed to wear saffira. This is 15th century English. So saffira kerchiefs. This is a kerchief, or saffira shirts, right?
Okay.
Smocks. Sorry, smocks. Smocka. This is a smock. This is a smock. So it says that women are not allowed to wear that within English territory, right? But it doesn't say anything about men. I mean, men and saffron shirts or saffron kerchiefs. But it does say that men should not, if they're in Dublin, if they're in the franchise, as it's called, the area that is covered by the municipality of Dublin, in essence, that men are not allowed to wear a mantle, and they're talking about the brat, of course. They're not allowed to wear their mantle as a daily garment. Okay. Which is very interesting, that phrasing. Yeah. It's just like the Second Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. You have to actually pay close attention to the phrasing, the terminology, and the syntax, because it's not as obvious as it seems at first. Because that qualifier, as their daily garment, means that if they're just wearing it as a fashion piece, right, regardless of the weather, they're not allowed to wear it. And that's because it identified them as being Irish. Yeah. Right. But if it's, if the weather's crappy, if it's cold, then of course, wear your cloak. But if you're just wearing it as a statement of I'm Irish and you're not, then you're not allowed to wear it. So that's a very interesting way of phrasing that. But there's no mention of yellow shirts or smocks for men and them being banned for men. So there's a couple of ways. This is for within the Pale, mind you. So there's a couple of ways we could interpret that. One, women within the Pale were Irish women, particularly who were living in the Pale, were maybe spending beyond their means on saffron dyed items and wearing them inside the Pale. And, they were spending too much money and that was becoming an economic problem. It could be. It could be that these items, they were wearing the style of items that Irish women, the Gaelic Irish women, were wearing outside of the pale, but
Mm,
they're inside of the pale. So that identifies, that shows them that they're not just as being Irish, but that their loyalties lie outside of the pale, right?
mm,
Because they're wearing these garments that show that they have an Irish heart, right? Even
mm,
though it could just be, I like wearing yellow things. Um,
mm,
so that's a visual symbol that they're not loyal to the crown because they're not wearing the English habita. They're
mm,
wearing the Irish habita. And
mm,
that's not, that potentially represents disloyalty and maybe potential dissension, could
mm,
lead to political upheaval in the pale, right?
mm,
So there's so many ways we can interpret that law, and the reality is it could be all of those things. That
mm,
could be all of those could be the reasons why this was passed. But no matter what, it is a sign that there were women in the pale who were wearing yellow dyed kerchiefs, maybe with saffron,
mm,
and yellow dyed smocks, maybe with saffron. But we also find that the term saffron also becomes a color.
mm,
So it's not necessarily that it has been dyed with saffron to make yellow. The word saffron becomes a color.
yeah.
So that can be tricky in interpreting. Okay, well, do they mean it was dyed with saffron or just yellow? And I suspect it's yellow because you can't, if there's a woman walking around Dublin with a kerchief and it's yellow, most people aren't going to be able to look at it and say, oh yeah, saffron dyed, you're breaking the rules. Oh, but you only use broom to make that yellow. Oh, well, that's okay, right?
Yeah.
It's about the color.
Mm, that's fascinating because Kevin says it as well. Are they using it like gang colors, the color yellow, to say,
Right,
"Hey, look, I'm part of the king groups of Ireland"? Because I'm not going to turn around and say these are proud-Irish nationalists, but these
right,
guys are kind of proud to be part of the king groups of Ireland. The clan
right.
system of Ireland, rather than being a part of the centralized English identity
Yeah,
of I am proud I have the King of England. Instead, they're more proud of their, being part of the king group system in Ireland, where clans in Ireland were linked together through fosterage, hostages, and marriage alliances.
yep,
And to be a part of that clique and to go to assemblies, it makes sense that they were wearing yellow to signify, hey, look, I'm proud to be a part of this, identity of king groups.
right.
Um, I'm not going to turn around and say that they were proud to be flying the Irish tricolour and say, I'm a proud Irish nationalist,
Yeah, I don't think so. Uh,
because there is no Irish nationalism in Ireland. But as Dr. Owen O'Neill has pointed out, the Irish, even in the early medieval period, do multiple times turn around and call themselves the Gael. So there
yeah,
is a level of identity
sure,
there.
absolutely,
So it
100%.
it is interesting that we have two systems in Ireland at the time. We have the English royalist system where people are turning around and saying, oh, I'm English and I'm civilized and I identify with the
Yeah,
King of England. And then you have
yeah,
other people who are quite proud to be attached onto the wider king groups.
yeah.
Now, on saying that, many of the cities are not the biggest fan of the king group system because of the
Yeah,
fact that they have to pay tribute to the clans of Ireland and to
yeah.
this wider king group system. That's why Galway probably responded the way it did by saying, "Oh well, I'm not part of the king group. I'm not paying this tax to
Follow the
these."
money, Philip. Follow the
Yeah,
money.
yeah. I'm not paying this tax to a bunch of clans like the O'Briens, like the De Burghs, like the Fitzgeralds. I'm a civilized English person. My
Right,
tax should be just going to the English king. By the way, who cannot collect his tax, right? So the
right.
English king has no problems recognizing the people of Galway. But also on top of that as well, the people of Galway are not paying any tax to the English king, right? So that's also something to take note of as well. They're still, even when they're recognizing themselves and rolling, these people with these huge West Irish accents trying to put on a fake English accent, and trying to
Oh
do
my
a
God.
posh little
Oh
walk
my
around the
God. I
place.
can't even, I can hear it in my head and it sounds glorious.
Yes. Oh, stop! There was a girl. What was it? She's getting slagged this week. She was on, and this gets worse, right? I have to tell the full story of this. I sent this thing, just to put this in context, right? Last week I sent oh god, a message over to you, Rachel, and I said I think it's 10,000 Americans have immigrated over to Ireland, which means there's
Right.
more
Yep.
Americans immigrating to Ireland than there is over to America.
Yep.
And normally, like back in 2015 and downwards, if an Irish person was to be seen as being posh, they would put on this disgusting American accent, which I always
Ugh,
thought was absolutely disgusting, right?
God.
So the country is already filled with Americans, and Americans like Irish food. They love Irish stews. They love what was it called? I can't remember what the Dubs.
Soda
One of you
bread.
guys, yeah. So well, I love soda bread. Talk about what the Dubs make. They have a stew with a sausage in it. One of you guys will correct me on this one, but the Americans like it anyway. Americans like Irish food, right? And this Irish person, would you believe it or not, right? Her grandfather is really famous with working on the yachts and stuff. And she turned around and says, "Oh, well, I'm too posh to be eating Irish food. It's just
Oh,
potatoes."
God.
And she did it. By the way, she
Oh,
did it with
God.
an American, this really, 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 really bad American accent. And oh
Why?
my God,
Why?
yes,
Why?
yes. So even
Why?
Americans living and working in Ireland were turning on the TV and watching this one say it, and they were cringing for her. Like it was absolutely, and she had a Dublin accent. You could tell she had a native Dublin accent. Like,
Jesus.
oh,
Why, God?
stop.
Oh
Oh
my God.
no, absolutely
Anyway,
terrible.
so Saffron. So what the point? My point is that I have not yet found evidence of men wearing yellow undershirts, the lena,
Mm,
in 15th century Ireland. I if any of you have primary source evidence of men having worn yellow lenas in the 15th century in any part of Ireland, I would
mm,
be very keen to hear it. But I just haven't found it, Philip. It's interesting because we have those chronicles by foreigners from the late 14th and early 15th century talking about their encounters with the Gaelic Irish, right?
mm,
And none of you, for certain, I just can't imagine they wouldn't have commented on the strangeness of a yellow dyed undershirt because that's not how it was anywhere else in Europe.
mm,
Everywhere else in medieval Europe, people are wearing white undergarments because these undergarments get washed. They get boiled, they get put in the sun. So why in God's name would you dye it? The colors are just going to fade out and dyeing is expensive.
mm,
So I can't imagine that, that Viscount Pilgrim to St. Patrick's Purgatory would not have, when he was commenting about every other aspect of the clothes at the court of the King of Tyrone, as he
mm,
calls them, right, that he wouldn't have mentioned that, oh, by the way, the shirts they do wear are yellow. Like, because that would have been
mm.
strange to him. It would have been very strange to him. So I just
Yeah,
haven't found the evidence
yeah.
for men wearing saffron dyed shirts, whereas there's clearly evidence that women in Dublin were certainly doing it. You don't pass laws against things that aren't happening. So,
That's interesting, all right? Because if we look at the drawing of Archmacmore Cabinet by the French depict him with a long red lena. So it's still
yeah.
going. That lena is still going down to his
I don't
ankle, as we
yeah,
can see. Yeah, go
I
on.
don't think that's Elena. Mm-mm.
Okay,
I think that's an overtunic. I think
okay.
I think that's either an overtunic or it's supposed to be his gambeson, right?
Mm,
I don't think that's Elena. But the other thing is you can't really look at the colors that are being used in that manuscript. It was painted by a
okay,
Frenchman who probably never saw an Irishman. And in the original chronicle, the colors of his outfit are not described.
okay.
So that's artist. That's what we call the artist's rendering
Mm,
of the events. You can't use that to document almost anything
mm,
about what was actually happening because that the illuminator was just going based on a combination of what oh God, Jean Créton. That was, I think it was Jean Créton who wrote about that. It might have also been actually the other Jean chronicler, French chronicler who wrote his Chronicles of Ireland and England.
mm,
His name, of course, has escaped my head at the moment. Anyway, I read that account, and in the account, the French account, he doesn't actually describe the colors what art is wearing. So the illuminator was therefore, forced to just do something. So yeah, I would never use that as a statement of this is what they were wearing, which is why I'm looking for documentary evidence, right? Documentary evidence is really important in these situations. So, but it is interesting
But it was
those, no, go on.
Go on.
Those
No, I was
sumptuary
just
laws.
looking at O'Brien.
Darn it, there's a lag.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah. No, it's grand. It's grand.
Okay, so the interesting thing about those sumptuary laws passed by Edward IV in 1461 or 14, that's when he came to power, 1464 or 66. The interesting thing about them is that they do talk about men, but it's the cloak that they mention, the brat. They don't mention the men and their yellow shirts, which should be equally offensive. It should be equally problematic as a sign of Irishness. But it seems that maybe it wasn't a problem, which maybe means it wasn't happening yet. It could be that it's the fashion that was just getting started, honestly. Or getting picked back up again, and that it slowly gains steam as the 15th century wore on, and then by the 16th century we have very clear evidence, right? But the earliest 16th century evidence is like 1520 that I could find.
Yeah. Not
that I've not done a deep dive onto the 16th century sources because I don't care so much about the 16th century. I happen to have to read about the 16th century Irish situation because that's most of the information that's available on so-called medieval Irish clothing. Medieval is in quotes, is about the 16th century, which is not medieval, but that's okay.
But the lena for men still must be very long, because if we look at O'Brien's effigy, it still has it going as far as his just past the knee.
I don't think that's his lena. I think that's his inar. That's his overgarment. That's his over tunic.
Okay.
If you look, especially if you go back in the sources, they talk about the lena is the layer you wear against your skin, and they had another layer that went over top of that was generally made of wool or silk. That's the inar. So I don't think that's his lena. That's his overgarment.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. And I like that effigy I actually have in front of me now. That does not have a belt on it, so it's interesting. I reckon that definitely would the over tunic have been kilted up as well, I wonder.
Only if needed. I mean, only if needed. So kilting is starts off for the first many centuries that people are kilting their garments. It's all about practicality. It's all about, it's muddy. I need this to not drag in the mud. It's that's basically what it's all about. And that's why it's mostly women who are described as kilting their garments, because women like me in this kirtle have long skirts. And when it gets wet and muddy outside, they don't want their skirts becoming a mud sponge. So they kilt them up. So it's, men don't really need to start kilting anything for the most part until you get to the end of the 16th century, when, it's getting so cold because of the Little Ice Age that men start swathing themselves in, 6 to 9 yards of wool. And someone realizes that, that's the brat is not necessarily that long, but it's, if you look at the way the brat is worn, like on that bard from the Scotachronicon, the Irish bard who's depicted in the Scotachronicon, he's got it kind of draped around himself in this jaunty manner, right? It's like wrapped kind of across his body and then comes back over and then drapes down again. And that's all fine and well until it's getting really cold and you need more fabric. And then you realize to control this garment, you need to belt it. So that it stays on your body, and then you pull it up through the belt to keep it from slipping down through the belt. So that's I haven't seen any evidence, visual or otherwise, of kilting as such in the later Middle Ages. There's a couple of I think you and I looked at a stone carving from like the 5th or 6th century that depicts warriors, and it looks like they're wearing some kind of cloaky thing draped around their bodies in that manner. and there might be a belt around their tunic. That the tunics might be bloused up over it a little bit, but fully kilted, not really. Certainly even in Europe in the 13th century, when they start wearing baggy clothes again, everyone in the 13th century starts wearing baggy clothes, which is why that effigy of King O'Connor, right?
Yeah.
He's wearing like this full length, almost to the ground tunic. That's what a lot of people, men included, were wearing in the 13th century. And when you start wearing garments that long, someone decides to put on a belt, and then there's like this little minor blousing effect that was kind of stylish amongst men and women in the 13th century, kind of all over Europe. But yeah, full out kilting in the sense of pulling it all the way up through your belt. We see that on depictions of the Lena in Ireland in the 16th century. We see it. But I haven't seen or read any evidence of it before that, really.
Yeah. I'm just quickly looking for that blasted bog body as well, so I can just have a quick scan of him.
Oh, the Sligo bog body? Sligo?
Sligo.
By the way, everyone, the old pronunciation of that word is not sly, it's Sligo. It's in old Irish, it is not pronounced sly. That's okay.
Buddy. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Cannot see the Lena whatsoever on that bog body.
I don't think there was one. I don't think it survived. I don't think it survived. Now, but that's why we need to reach out to the museum where that's housed and see if we can have a chat with it, like an actual conversation, like an actual like video conference or something, because there's a lot of information that is missing. And I don't think my impression is that Elena was not found with that body, which the Lena may have, it's linen. It may not have survived.
Wait, I'm in contact with the woman. I'm sure. Give me a quick second. I'm sure I'm in contact with the woman on TikTok who worked on that bug body. Let me be very quick on that, and we can answer Jim's question at the same time. Jim's question: what was the natural color of the clothing before it was dyed? Okay. What was the natural clothing of?
Great question, Jim. Just so happens that I'm braiding undyed hemp, which is basically the color of undyed linen as well. So this is the color of undyed linen and undyed hemp, right? It's kind of a sad gruel gray color, right? So the reason it's white is because it gets bleached to white. So this is what the color would be if it were just natural. And in many monastic communities, the regulations of the order actually mandated undyed linen tunics, not white tunics, because this is more, and undyed is definitely a step down in terms of expense, because you're just wearing the natural color of the plant. So yeah, even though ironically, this might be better to leave it undyed because this is kind of skin grime color. This is the color of ring around the collar. So if your garment is already this color, then those kinds of nasty stains won't show up. So who knows? But yeah, this is what it would be, what hemp or linen would be if it were undyed. Wool depends on the sheep, right? You have brown wool, you've got that kind of cream colored wool, you've got brown wool that's verging on black. It's so dark. So depends on your sheep. But when it comes to linen and hemp, this is it. This is undyed. Ramie undyed is more of a tan color, as far as I can tell. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good question, Jim. Thank you for asking.
I actually have her here, Laura Fitz. Her second name is really difficult to pronounce, but she is on Seek the Historical. I'll get in contact with her because I'm confident she's worked on that before. She's a fashion historian.
But does she work at the museum? See,
I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but she could have contacts. And if
Right.
she does it, Melissa definitely would
Yeah,
have
we need
contacts. And we've been,
what I'm learning is we need to get to the museums. we need to
yeah.
talk about them. And honestly, Philip, what would be super awesome if we could make it happen is you and I take a trip to Ireland together and we do a museum tour, going specifically making appointments to look at the extant garments in person. That would be the ideal. If we could make that happen, that would be really fantastic.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, you're friends with all of her friends, but you're not friends with her. That's
Really?
so funny how
Who's
you guys haven't actually
who is this individual? I don't recognize the name.
seek the historical, right? And
Okay.
she's literally a ton of people you're
Ha,
friends with. She's also friends
that's
with,
funny.
but you guys just somehow haven't clicked together
It's
yet.
all
Yeah, it
about
is
what the
funny.
gram suggests. You know what I mean? It's, so I saw a comment about pleats. So so pleats don't get added into the Scottish, and this is Scottish kilt, by the way. In Ireland, this doesn't seem to happen. Pleats don't get added to the darn it, I've got brat stuck in my head. The plaid. They don't get added into the plaid. And by the way, plaid is actually a Low Scots word that gets adopted into Gaelic by the 16th century. I had some Scot trying to argue linguistics with me when he's clearly not a linguist. Like, dude, if you're not a linguist, don't get into an etymology fight with a professional linguist, buddy. You really don't want to do that. I am a professional linguist. It's literally what I went to university for. Anyway, plaid goes from Low Scots or Scots gets adopted into Gaelic, and it just means blanket. And so that is what a plaid is. And the term that the actual Gaelic term for what we now call a kilt also means blanket or cloak. So it has nothing to do with pleating. It has nothing to do with skirt. It's got nothing to do with that. It just means a big rectangle of fabric, basically. And so the first one we ever see depicted is at the tail end of the 16th century in Scotland, and it's a sketch by a Dutch visitor. It's not even, there's almost no visual references from 16th century Scotland that are by Scottish artists because of the Reformation and the iconoclasm that resulted from that. Anyway, so what the very first depiction we see is a Scotsman who is wearing a doublet and trunk hosen that lace into the doublet. And over top of that, actually the hosen only go down to his knees, and then he's got bare calves, which is the red shank thing. But he's wearing shoes. But bare calves, shoes, nether hosen that go down to his knees. What he's wearing over top of all of that is this giant length of wool that has been wrapped around his body in a very specific way so that it keeps his torso warm, but it doesn't impede his arms, and it's belted so that it doesn't just fall off of his body. But there's no pleating at all, not yet. The pleating doesn't seem to come, people don't figure out about pleating by adding the pleats in and belting it until sometime in the 17th century. It's unclear when exactly. And it doesn't become the small kilt until the 18th century. And then it gets forced into shape as the national garment of Scotland, even though it's a relatively recent introduction to Scottish fashion.
I love talking about the history of the kilt, as long as it's done perfect and right.
Yeah.
On saying that, we've got some really good, interesting questions starting to pop up there. So Kevin asks for reenactment. So should we really be hoping to see more colors and variants in the lenas in reenactment communities? Almost imagine most weren't yellow, even if only some used saffron. So in 15th century enactment, should we be seeing more color variants in Irish lenas?
I have no evidence for it. I see, this is the problem. I like to go where the evidence takes me. I have not found not a single iota of evidence from 15th century Ireland about men wearing dyed lenas. None. I haven't seen it. So based on the evidence we have, no, you should be wearing a white one. Now, this is why I say, if anyone out there has evidence that in the 15th century, Irishmen were wearing lanas, meaning the linen undershirt, the layer against your skin, that were dyed any color, I would be really grateful to see that. But I haven't. I haven't found it. I haven't seen it. And some people say, well, an absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. However, I also don't want to just make shit up.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. And we know that literally everywhere else in Europe in this time, men are wearing white undershirts, white linen undershirts. And we know that, that makes actually the most sense, because to get your shirt clean, it has to be boiled. It gets laid out in the sun. It gets beaten, actually, in some cases, to try to get out particularly stubborn stains. They'll actually beat the soap into the lye into the fabric to really get that stain out. And if you're abusing your garment in that way and you've got expensive dye stuff in it, the dye stuff isn't going to last long. To be frank, linen cellulose fibers do not take dyes very well anyway. And that's the other problem. So that's the other problem with linen. Natural plant or animal-based dyes, linen, cellulose, meaning cotton, ramie, ramie is another cloth, hemp, linen, those plant-based fibers, they do not take dyes well. It's very hard to dye them. There's only a limited number of dye stuffs that will actually adhere to cellulose fibers of the natural dye stuffs. Indigo is one of them, woad is one of them, and saffron is another of them. But even still, they fade relatively quickly. The colors do not last. They don't stay vibrant. They don't last long. And God knows if you start laundering it, they're really not going to last long. So it would be a very expensive proposition to dye it in the first place. Dyeing was expensive. Even if it was a cheap dye stuff, you still had to pay a professional dyer to do it. There's still the cost of the materials. You have to pay for firewood, right? It's an expensive process, no matter what kind of dye stuff you're using. It's not, and most people in the 15th century didn't have time to just be dyeing their own clothes. This weird idea of, the homestead, the medieval homesteader who does it all. No, medieval society was highly, highly stratified in terms of professions, even in Ireland. You had people who specialized in dyeing. You had people who specialized in sewing. You had people who specialized in leatherwork, specific kinds of leatherwork. There wasn't one person who generally did all of this. So you also wouldn't have time if you are out on a farm somewhere on one of these farms you talk about. You're not going to have time to dye your clothes. You've got to work on the farming. You've got to see to your animals. You've got to make sure people aren't stealing your cows. You don't have time to be dyeing your clothes. So it doesn't make sense to me. Honestly, the yellow lana has never made sense to me, except as an item of very conspicuous consumption, which means that you're going to have to be at a certain level of society to be able to afford it.
Yeah.
Which means that it can't be the majority of people that are doing it.
Yeah. Big time.
It just can't.
I always thought that, to be quite honest with you.
It can't be.
Because anytime I see depictions of everybody running around with saffron, I'm like, but that makes, especially after I'd done all the work back in Ireland for myself and Claire did the majority of it. Had done all the work for the saffron tunic. My brain was just like, but how could everybody do that? That makes no sense. And people were making the argument just by default, oh, but everyone must have it. And it's like, but did you not read the Brehon Law? Ireland still recognizes within the clan that there is poorer members of the clan and higher members of the clan. And anyone who's running the administration itself clearly is the richer status members of the clan.
Yeah.
And I know people are turning around and say, oh, but there's no real currency within the clans, but there's still status within the clans. So
there's exactly. And there's still a barter system, right? Even if you don't have currency, you still have items that are more or less valuable than others that you trade. Like there's always a monetary system, even if it's not money per se. So come on.
Yeah. 100%. Like there definitely is a level of status within the clans that you do have people who were referred to, well, at this point, actually Taoiseachs. So it actually makes it easier for us. I was about to say about Ree and stuff.
Right.
The argument I had yesterday about the description of what is a king, but thank God that word is gone now in the late medieval period. And we just have Taoiseach. And Taoiseach directly translated means what was it called? Head of the clan, chieftain, right? So
Right.
that's the direct translation is Taoiseach, which God, it makes life way easier for us to have a discussion on what is a clan. And then you have, just for your own common knowledge, you have Taoiseach, and Taoiseach means prince of the clan or heir of the clan. So that's the one that the Taoiseach is going to choose next. Now it still turns into a mess sometimes, where you have the sons suddenly killing sons to take the title of Taoiseach of the clan.
Right.
But the chief of the clan, the Taoiseach, he does try to make it as easy as possible by choosing which one will be the Taoiseach next. But sometimes it doesn't work out like that, and you still have sons killing sons, like pretty much all over Europe, where it's like, that's my land.
Yeah, I mean, humans, man, we're tribal. We're tribal. We're possessive. The linguistics. So all those terms you just quoted are no doubt the reason why when foreigners go to Ireland across the Middle Ages and they write about their experiences, they use terms that make the most sense in their culture and language, but that don't reflect the nuances of the hierarchies within Ireland. That's why, Ramon de Perellos goes, leaves Barcelona basically, and he goes up to St. Patrick's Purgatory, he goes to Tyrone, and he's like, yes, the King of Tyrone in the 1390s. And I remember you said to me, the what of Tyrone? It's like, yes, because to him, this man was the leader of this kingdom. He had a court, and so he calls him a king, because that's how his, very late medieval Catalan brain could process, this word.
But
Yeah, so it can lead to confusion, in the record.
It does, because even Henry II, when he comes to Ireland to basically see what the crack is, see what the hell is going on, because Normans and the Gaelic are all chopping each other up, and he wants to take advantage of the situation. He has no clue how the Irish administration works, because he's looking at the Over King of Ireland and he's like, why is that not centralized around him the way it is centralized around me? Like, he thinks it's
Right.
strange. But even that direct translation of re or I father king applies that something is centralized.
Right.
But you could have a baron, a basic lord, who's referred to as re or I father, and its direct translation means king. But he's only got like the status of a baron. And the thing is that although these barons were independent within their own lands, they were tied into Gaelic society as a whole through marriage alliances, hostages, and through fosterage. So the society itself tied you in. And this is what happens when the Normans come into Ireland, when the Vikings come into Ireland, is that within 2-3 generations, these people are tied into society. And even people today reading, as you were looking at last night, the Annals of Ulster and stuff, they don't understand that these Vikings, only 3 generations in, are literally fighting their cousin. But people don't understand that. They assume that the Vikings are coming in, and now we're looking at 200 years of Viking occupation. No. This is now family killing family. These people are already linked into Irish society through marriage alliance. So when Ivor the Bonus comes in, for him to conduct his business in Ireland, he had to marry an Irish woman, right? So he marries an Irish woman. He fostered. Yes, of course it is. What was it called? He fostered his son Broder Emer to the northern Enel, the Kennel Owen, and he also both gives hostages and he takes hostages as well. So it ties him into the society. This is Ivor the Boneless. So only within a generation, his son then, Broder Emer, he's very much a part of Irish politics in Ireland. So it is Irish killing Irish. What was it called? I'm quickly looking at the effigies as well at the same time. And it's funny because some of the effigies have what looks like under tunics, because I can see in the gallo glass sketch drawing, granted it is early 16th century, but
Yeah.
it also shows Elena going down past the knee. But there's also other effigies as well that shows Lena is going past the knee. Well, what I'm assuming
Yeah,
is Lena.
but
But yeah,
yeah, those look like gambesons to me, Philip. They're
yeah,
all padded. They've
yeah.
all got channels, and they've got those to me look like gambesons.
But
And considering that they're wearing male hauberks over them, they
yeah.
better be wearing padded gambesons.
Well,
I
but
don't.
the Gano glass one is funny. But you're saying
Yeah,
there, we did say before that was a description from a German, so that
yeah,
one could be funny as well. You see, that's the problem as well. The Art McMurrow one is a drawing from a Frenchman,
yeah,
and the Gallo glass one is a drawing by a German. And it has been pointed out a few times that this is second-hand information.
yeah,
So, if I don't know,
yeah.
and then go on.
It's really tricky, and that's why it's really important to find Irish
Mm,
Irish documentary evidence. If we can't find the visual evidence, we can at least maybe find some documentary evidence. You
mm, mm.
know, I just, this, it really does not make sense
Yeah.
in the 15th century to be wearing a male hauberk over a linen shirt.
Yeah,
It
that
just
makes
doesn't.
sense.
It,
Mm,
it, 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 if you think about the kinds of weapons that are being used,
mm,
and we're also getting into black powder, right? So,
yeah,
why, the male is not going to protect you at all
mm,
against the crushing power of the kinds of pole arms that are being used in war in the
mm,
15th century and into the 16th century. You're going to have crushed bones. You're going
yeah,
to die a horrible death from sepsis if you don't bleed out.
mm,
Whereas if you have a padded undergarment, that's going to go a much longer way to protecting you from being crushed, your bones from being crushed when you inevitably get struck by one of these mass weapons.
mm,
It doesn't, for my eye, the second I looked at any of those gallo glass uh, or effigies, right? The
mm,
second I looked at them, my first thought was, oh, look at that nice padded gambeson.
yeah,
I didn't look at them and see pleats or
yeah,
folds. And that's the other thing. People look at it and see pleats. No, that is that is how a not so really skilled sculptor depicts folds of fabric.
mm,
Because to actually accurately depict folds of fabric in stone is a really high level skill. It takes
mm,
a lot of mastery. Like we're impressed by Michelangelo because he could do that. We're impressed by him because not everyone could in his era.
yeah,
That doesn't So we have to be careful about interpreting art like that. We have to look at it and consider, does this look like it's a super skilled piece of sculpture? If it
mm,
doesn't, then we have to consider that it's stylized representation of things like the folds of fabric, or or it's not the stylized representation of folds of fabric. It's actually just a padded gambeson. Like you can, yeah. It never made sense to me wearing a male hauberk over a freaking linen shirt. Not
yeah.
in the 15th century. In the third century, okay, sure,
Mm,
maybe.
mm,
15th century,
mm.
mm.
Right. Just to put our foot down for the time being until we get in contact with the what was it called, the Museum of Ireland, the National Museum of Ireland. What was it called? For the time being, where for me now, who wants to recreate Desmond Fitzgerald's
Yeah.
linen tunic, do you think we should go for the tunic going before the knee or after the knee for the
I mean,
time being?
I think you're going to regret your life choices if we go lower than the knee. You're probably
Okay.
going to want it above your knee,
Okay.
and this is why, especially if you want to be able to wear this shirt with with a more Anglo Irish ensemble, right?
Yeah.
If you decide you want to have the cool kids French style fashions, or
Mm,
then the shirt becomes much more, because the shirt's going to have to get tucked down into your hosen
yeah.
also, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, so you're not going to want a shirt that goes down to below your knees.
You're
But
right, actually,
yeah,
because if we look at the Anglo-Irish effigies, I cannot see Lena whatsoever, especially with the Anglo-Irish armor. The
mm-mm,
Anglo-Irish
mm-mm.
armor seems to be completely
It's
tucked in.
harness. Yeah, it's
If we look
harnessed.
at the butlers, what was it called, Anglo-Irish armor, and I think everyone should look at this on Google as well because it's
Yeah.
insanely unique. But if we look at it, there is no sign of a lena there whatsoever. There's
Mm-mm.
nothing poking out. It's all nice and tidied
Mm.
away.
And there's
So I
no
think you're right about
gambeson
that. Yeah.
because in that era, when you have that kind of armor, that kind of
Mhm.
cuirass, basically, I mean, it's segmented, whatever, but it's still a cuirass,
Okay.
and it's clearly made of metal.
Mm.
You don't need a gambeson. You don't need that padded garment because that's what the metal plates are doing.
Mm.
So this is a mistake some harness that some reenactors make, is they think, or reenact, people who do medieval recreation or even LARPers, they make the mistake of thinking, oh, I need this padded arming garment to go under my full metal harness and my metal arms and my metal legs. And no, the metal it takes the place of the padded garment. You
Mm.
don't need the padding anymore. And that's why it's not so bulky, right? It looks nice. Like you can see their figures nice and trim, those sexy chalice shaped waists, right? So they're no longer wearing a padded garment beneath it because they don't need it. Whereas
Mm.
your men, the gallows glass, they
Yeah.
are not wearing metal harness. They are wearing mail hauberks. So
Mm.
they need that padding to act as armor, basically.
Mm.
So yeah, no, I mean, the other thing is, so we should look also, if you look at the bard, the Irish bard, right? So from the
Yeah.
1440s,
Yeah. You're
if you
right.
look,
Second.
he's kneeling. You don't see, there's no shirt that comes down over his knees.
Mm.
You can see his knee, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Right. So for those who are wondering, we're talking about this fantastic frontispiece or a fantastic illumination from the Scotichronicon by William Bowder.
Yeah.
Composed, by William Bowder. He actually did author it. In the 1440s is when it's illuminated and calligraphed and all set down in this beautiful, very gorgeously illuminated and illustrated compendium of Scottish history. And it depicts that great Irish bard kneeling before Alexander III.
Yeah.
And what's fantastic about this depiction, everyone, is that he looks like he's wearing almost exactly the same thing as the Sligo bog body find.
Mm.
And he also looks very close to what that Irishman who's kneeling in that effigy is wearing as well, who's kneeling with his, he's like this, and it looks almost exactly the same. So it's very clearly depicting what Irish people were wearing, what Irish men were wearing in the 15th century, in the middle of the 15th century. And if you look there, you can see that he definitely there's no shirt that goes down over his knee.
Mm. It's so exciting because I'm going from Irish Ridra meaning Irish knights, to suddenly looking at the bards and then flying over to Irish nobles and stuff. And we're here trying to, and it keeps going back to the thing of we actually need to have a solid find here. Okay, so for the time being, we're going to aim for a lena that just goes before the knee.
Yeah.
And we're going to get in contact with the National Museum of Ireland because these images are too questionable. Like if you guys go onto Google now, just open up, if you can open up another window and just type in 15th century Irish effigies and then look at the Butler effigy, for example. There's no lena there. If you literally do what Rachel says there, go over to Alexander III, King of Scotland, and you'll see the second drawing, you can see a bard in there.
Yeah.
You can see it's very, very questionable, but it looks like, as we're pointing out there, the Sligo bog body. So if you go into Google as well and type in Sligo bog body, you can see that long coat. It's exactly like the long coat. That's crazy.
Yeah,
like
it really looks. It's so similar. And the problem, I've said this before, but for those of our audience who maybe haven't heard it yet, the problem with the Sligo bog body is that it hasn't been dated, to my knowledge. And so there's debate in the history community in general, but specifically in historical fashion community. Does that bog body date from the 14th century, 15th, 16th, or 17th century? So so we don't even know, but the similarities between that ensemble and the bard in that 1440 Scotichronicon, and that kneeling effigy of that gentleman who might be actually a tailor or a weaver or something. We've looked at that one together too. He's got that beautiful full mustache and the full curly hair, right? And he's kneeling and in profile, and you can see that he's got a belt and he's got buttons down the front of his coat, COTE, right? That those all tie together. So whether the Sligo body was in fact a 17th century person, he's still wearing 15th century style clothes. Very clearly, he's still wearing 15th century style clothes. So yeah, we definitely, it would be super grand, Philip, like super duper grand, if we could somehow get an appointment to actually look at those garments in person. That would be real fabulous. If we could manage that. But if not, if we could get them to go and take some detailed pictures for us, and send them to us. Good. Like we can say, I need pictures of this seam and that seam and that kind of thing. If we could just get that, that would be great.
Okay.
But and the other thing we have to think about is the sleeve of the Lena, right? And there's no way you can get away with big, huge sleeves in that style of garment. It would be so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking, because if you look at all the 15th century effigies, there is zero massive sleeves, except for, what do you think of, what was it called? There is one from the Butler, the women. The effigies of the women seem to have massive sleeves.
They have. So the Butler, those women are all wearing what are called hupelons in French, or gowns in English. But those are early 15th century style. And so the style at that time in the first half of the 15th century, all across most of Europe, in fact, was big sleeves. Yeah. So that's not a Lena they're wearing. That's a heavy woolen or silk overgarment. So you can't even see their Lenas, actually. And you can't see their kirtles, which they're probably also wearing. So yeah, those sleeves are not Lena sleeves. Those are gown sleeves.
But the men next to them don't have long sleeves whatsoever. Like they're nice and tight in the 15th century. So you can quite clearly see that in the effigies of the 15th century to do with the butlers. Yeah. What was it called? Where you have Miss Butler, and she's got the big, massive sleeves. But next to her, you have Mr. Butler, and his sleeves are nice and tidied away. So I definitely would say in the 15th century, everything seems to be tidied away. And then as we go into the 16th century and the Tudor conquest of Ireland, that's when we get those big, massive sleeves in Ireland.
And I hate to. Oh, go on. Ask the question. I think you're going to ask the right question. Go on.
Oh, I might. Is that? I'm probably going to ask the wrong one, to be honest with you, and go on a completely different tangent. But is that a Spanish influence coming in?
You asked the right question.
All right, it is. Go on.
Okay.
Feeding each other's mind here. Go on.
Yeah, you asked the right question. Is that a Spanish influence? So I think it is. But I think it's not just Ireland that's being influenced by that. It's a Europe-wide thing. In the early 16th century, and actually it's a trend that starts in the later 15th century outside of Spain. The smock sleeves, the undershirt sleeves for men and women start getting bigger and fuller. And as the 16th century dawns and proceeds onward, the sleeves just get bigger and bigger for men and women. That garment becomes an item of conspicuous consumption until they get so big that they hit a point sometime around the middle of, it seems that around the middle of the 16th century, that people suddenly add cuffs. So the sleeve is still big, but they just put a cuff on it so that the width is all gathered around the wrist, but the sleeve itself is still really full. So that's not just something that the big sleeve Lena in Ireland is not an Irish thing. It's a European fashion that shows, again, that Ireland is clearly connected to Europe in terms of its fashion trends. So I think, and I really do trace it. I trace that back to the Spanish court in the early 15th century, actually. If you look in Castilla at the fashions, the women are wearing these, really big smock sleeves. Camisa, it would be in Spanish, like really long. And they've got this gorgeous black work or red work and sometimes gold work embroidery on them, or ribbons sewn onto them, these long, elegant black lines. And their dresses are designed so that they have a sleeve on top, like the top half of their arm, but the bottom half doesn't have a sleeve. actually, and so that beautiful camisa sleeve just hangs luxuriantly, right? It's this real conspicuous conception because let me tell you, those sleeves are annoying to wear.
Mm,
So annoying. They get in everything. If you try to eat, your sleeve will try to eat too.
mhm.
So it's they're annoying. They are absolutely a sign of wealth and leisure, actually, to a certain degree. But that's where it starts. That spreads to Italy
Mm.
by the second half of the 15th century. And then if you start looking at the smock sleeves for men and women in further north, as the 15th century progresses, they start getting wider and wider. And then in the 16th century, they're real wide. So,
Ah, Roger, gotcha. That makes more sense.
yeah,
But for the time being, especially with this armor and stuff, it does seem to be all tidied
yeah,
away. Because I was making this argument, and maybe you can counter this. It's just it fits in more with the armor of the time to have
yeah,
everything just nice and tidied away, especially when you're going between the Hundred Years' War going into the Wars of the
yeah,
Roses, that the Irish are thinking to themselves, well, I need to take my riveted mail or what was it called, my harness on and off.
yeah.
I'm going to have everything nice and tight. But then the women just seem to be just, la di da da with their fancy, big,
Well,
massive everything.
I, so here's how I think about this. So we have a couple of effigies from Ireland, Gaelic Ireland, right
Mm,
from the 15th century, and I've shown these to you.
yeah.
There is a man. It's a depiction. I think it's probably the death of the Virgin is the scene it's depicting. But a
Mm,
couple of the people in this scene on this tomb are very clearly real people that were
mm,
included in the scene, the way you're like, I want you to carve me into the death of the Virgin. Like,
mm,
I'm giving you money, make me a character. And so I'm pretty certain this person is not wearing biblical clothes. He's wearing
mm.
fashionable clothes from the 15th century. And he's got a gauna, which is just the overgarment that has big organ pleats in it because it's so full that it just falls in these beautiful pleats and it's belted and it goes down to his ankles. Now
Mm.
that's his overgarment. That's not Elena. Um, and I don't remember offhand if it has big sleeves or if it has sleeves the sleeves are full and I don't remember if they're cuffed or if they fall open. But in the first half of the 15th century, it was fashionable for men to also for the first quarter of the 15th century, it was also fashionable for men to wear overgarments with big
Okay.
sleeves, not undergarments,
Uh,
overgarments with big sleeves. The
mm.
problem with your effigies is that all the men are in armor. They're all in harness,
Yeah.
right? They're not in civilian garments. But no matter what, they're absolutely not wearing big sleeved undershirts under that harness. It wouldn't work.
Mm,
They
mm,
wouldn't actually be able to flex their hand because there'd be so much fabric entombed against their arm by their metal cannons, right? They couldn't do it. So
mm.
those undershirts are certainly fitted, but we can't really know much about the civilian garments from those effigies because they're all carved like manly knights in their harness.
Mm.
So I would say that's not we can know that clearly Irish knights didn't wear long lena
Mm.
under their harness, that we know, but we don't
Yeah.
know what they would have worn in their civilian life, which is why we have to look at things like the Irish Bard and the Scotichronicon. We have to look at the other effigies that depict men in actual clothing, like in the case of that tailor or weaver who's kneeling. We have to look at the Sligo outfit, which I'm pretty certain didn't come. I think the Lena didn't survive because linen does not often survive well in
Oh,
bogs.
yeah.
So the linen garment, probably any linen garments that he may have been wearing, probably dissolved.
Mm.
So we can't know. But if you
Interesting.
you know it just if you look at the Scotichronicon bard kneeling, his shirt doesn't come down below his knees. It just doesn't make sense. And
Yeah.
under a fitted sleeve like that, oh no, that is not what you want. You do not
Mm.
want you do not want all this linen to be trapped up against your arm by a fitted tailored sleeve.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so we're going to go with the Lena. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to make it for the time being until we get in contact with the National Museum of Ireland. But even on
Yeah.
top of that, as you pointed out, the chances of it surviving is very slim. But for the time being, we'll go for a plain natural Lena. nice and tidied before the knee and being able to
Yeah.
fit on and off of the armor because of
Yeah.
the fact that we're looking into the 15th century. And I want to depict somebody from the Desmond Fitzgeralds who are between, when I say Anglo-Irish, by the way, I don't mean ethnically Anglo-Irish. I mean somebody who goes between both the English world and the Irish world. That's what people mean when they say Anglo-Irish. They mean somebody who goes between the, what was it called, the Irish world and the English world at the time. And because we have the likes of the 100 Years' War and we have people fighting in France, we need something that I can put on and then put armor on over it. Let it be riveted mail, or even later on, if God wants to give me lots and lots of money, we can put some plate armor on top of that as well. We have these choices to do. So that sounds like a solid plan.
Yeah.
We just need to investigate and see what kind of, what was it called, t-shirt line it would have been. The top part of it. I can't remember what you call it.
Yeah, the neckline. Yeah,
the neckline.
Yeah,
that's always what starts our arguments in the 10th century.
Right. Yeah, God knows it. It's going to start arguments. It's going to start arguments in 15th century Ireland as well, because
lovely.
because there are very, very few depictions of men in just their undershirt, and one of them that I can think of offhand comes from the Holy Trinity Bible, the Bible that's held at Trinity Cathedral in Dublin, and it depicts. It is a work of Irish origin, so it was calligraphed and illuminated in Ireland, but in Dublin. So, right, but it depicts a fool who is. We know he's a fool because the text, the biblical text, refers to the fool, so we know that it's depicting a fool. And as always, fools are very often depicted in undergarments, just undergarments. And so he is depicted wearing nothing but a smock, a lena, as you would say in Irish. And so we can look at that. That might be our best bet for the only thing we can really use as a basis for how an Irish lena may have looked in the 15th century. That might be it. And if I recall, his neckline is actually, it might be a boat neckline, but we can look at that more closely together. And the sleeves are not like super tight, but they're like, I think the sleeves are just kind of what I would call a normal amount of baggy for men's undershirts in this era. So I think we can look at that one as a good basis for how to actually shape this particular undershirt for you. The other thing to consider is that the coat, COTE, will be or also it's kind of called a gown also in this era sometimes in English, and it might be this, and this might be the garment that is sometimes referred to as inar in the Irish sources, right? The button down, what you're calling the coat layer, right? That comes up to the neck.
Okay.
It's going to be made of wool or silk, but if it's either way, what you really don't want is you don't want an undershirt that has a big open neckline like this if your overgarment comes up to your neck. Why? Why don't you want to have all this bare skin being exposed directly to your silk or your wool?
What was it called? Because it's uncomfortable, isn't it?
Oh, the wool would probably be uncomfortable. The silk would be comfortable, but your skin is nasty. Everyone's skin is nasty. Not a judgment on you, Philip. Humans are nasty creatures.
Yeah, that's very true.
And so our skin produces oils, and then the dirt from the air, detritus, gets trapped in the oils. And if your overgarment is lying directly against your skin, especially in this high traffic, because whenever you move, right, there's a lot of movement here, those oils will get ground into your overgarment, and that's where you get ring around the collar. And so your linen undershirt is designed to protect your overgarment. So in point of fact, I feel like we should design the neckline of your smock to reflect the height of the neckline of your inar, of your gown, right?
Yeah.
I think that's, and if you look at the necklines of the undershirts being worn by men all across the rest of Europe in the middle of the 15th century, then they all come up to here, and some of them even have actually collars, an extra band around the top here, so that your overgarment is particularly protected against your nastiness. Yeah.
Exciting stuff. Right, so that's the kind of neckline we'll be going for, well, for the time being, until we talk to the National
Yeah.
Museum of Ireland.
Yeah.
I see most of you guys are heading off to bed as well and switching over to my chat. So if you guys have any more questions, because good for you if you're going over to bed because you're coming over
Yeah.
from the UK and Ireland, so
Yeah.
you guys are going off to sleep now. We have another 10 minutes and we start to finish up there. So if you guys have any last questions, especially to do with clothing, because that's Rachel's field of expertise, please ask now before we start finishing up.
Yeah.
Is there anything else as well, Rachel, you need to cover as well? And what's your plans for the weekends? What are you up to for the weekend?
Yeah. Oh, today's Friday, isn't it?
Work-wise,
Oh, yes, it is.
work-wise,
It
no,
is.
not
It is. Yeah. Yeah. No,
not a
I don't.
personal life.
I don't have much of a personal life. Most of my life is work.
Yeah, Joe's.
Let's see. Well, tomorrow I'll be doing medieval story time on my Creative Contessa YouTube channel for those of you watching from other platforms. And we'll be going back to some primary source text, some exciting chronicles from the Middle Ages that cast an eye on daily life, a variety of aspects of daily life. So we'll be looking at court cases. We'll be looking at sermons from stodgy clerics. We'll be looking at some really interesting windows into daily life from the past. So if you're excited, if you'd like to hear what life was like from the voices of people who lived in that time, then tune in tomorrow. And then on Sunday, I'll have my usual medieval cooking party. And I think we're going to be doing medieval sauces. So if you're interested in learning how to make medieval condiments, including medieval mustard, by the way, from original medieval recipes, then tune in for that fun. And once again, we'll be using the comically giant mortar and pestle, just for everyone's amusement.
Okay, there's a few people asking about clothing. What was it called? You guys, when you're doing clothing, can you please give a date?
Yeah.
I'm going to assume, because a lot of you guys are coming in from my channel, I'm assuming you're talking about the 10th century clothing. So the question, if I'm just going to quickly adapt your clothing, because God would be all day talking about the different variants of clothing and stuff. So I'm just going to make it easy for Rachel and say, Rachel, how do I clean my 10th century reenactment clothing? How do I clean my woolen tunic? And how do I clean my linen under tunic when I come back from a reenactment event?
Yeah, those are good questions. So linen will shrink only if it hasn't been pre-shrunk. So you kind of have to know if you made your linen tunic, then you will know whether you washed it the fabric before you made it. If you washed and dried the fabric before you made the tunic, then you can wash and dry the fabric afterward, the tunic. No problem. It will not shrink. And linen can be washed on hot water. But linen, honestly, Philip, whenever you wash linen, I always put it into soak and let it soak for multiple hours. Because linen, the fibers are actually, when they're wet, they actually become stronger. So the longer you let it soak, the more the fibers fully hydrate. And then the washing process is less damaging. Your linen clothes will last longer if you let them soak for multiple hours, if not overnight, honestly, and then run them through your washing machine. So always soak your linens first. Don't just put them in the washer and let it go, because you'll actually do more damage to them over time. But if you didn't wash your fabric before you made your garment and you're worried about shrinking, then you might want to just hand wash it going forward.
Yeah, that's what I do.
But you don't have to. You don't have to. You only have to if you didn't wash the fabric first. Yeah, and wool, do not put wool in a washing machine.
Yes.
Don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, some people have told me, oh, well, my fancy schmancy washing machine has a fantastic wool cycle that's just like washing it by hand. Okay, good for you. But most people don't have sophisticated washing machines with that kind of wool hand wash cycle. So your best bet, what I do when I get back from an event, this is a wool kirtle. I put it in a bathtub, I fill it with cold water, and I just use my hands to swish it around in the cold water with soap if necessary, right? But gently, because the more you agitate your wool, the more the fibers will full and tighten and come together. So gently swish it,
Yes.
gently squish. Gently is the name of the game when it comes to wool. And cold water and soap. And if there's a specific spot that needs stain treatment, then focus on that spot with just a little dish soap. Dish soap is great. Gently, you want to rub gently. You don't want to, because if you do too much of this, you're going to create pilling. So gently, gently.
Yeah.
Gently is the name of the game with
Yeah,
wool.
100%. Yeah, that when I'm by myself, 100%, that's how I do it. But when I'm in my mother's house, my mother, she bullies everybody for their laundry, and she's like, "No, I'm doing it," and I'm like, "No, mom, don't put it in the washing machine."
Don't do
she's
it.
like, "I know what I'm doing. Yeah, I know what I'm doing." And don't get me wrong, it comes out, Rachel. It actually comes out really good. Okay, so my mom she knows what she's doing. And
She might have the right kind of washing machine with the right kind of setting, you know,
but
and
that's it.
And if you know your washing machine and you can trust it to handle your wool curdle. But let me tell you, I have lost 2 curdles to washing machine shrinkage. 2. So you know, you get to choose how much risk you want to take in the pursuit of clean garments. But most of my garments just go in the tub and I soak them and then let them hang out.
Oh, that's 100% what I do as well. That's how I was taught to do it from my living history group. So yeah, definitely follow your living history group, and if not, just listen to what Rachel has to say. Any more questions before I scan through? Wool, washing machine is exactly. I fully agree with the comment section. Don't put it into the washing machine. Hand wash it is always the way forward. That's the way I was taught. Unless you're dealing with my grandmother and my mother. What was it called? Unless you've got my grandmother and mother, do it by hand.
I mean, your mileage will vary, guys. I mean, it's, the problem is that a lot of people think their personal experience represents the majority when it's probably an outlier. Whereas I have talked to thousands of fellow reenactors over the decades that I've been doing this. And most of us share the same horror stories about wool shrinkage. So curdle goes in the machine, it comes out a child's curdle.
Yeah.
There you go.
Those clothing finds and stuff is the National Museum of Ireland next to Trinity. So the National Museum of Ireland next to Trinity is
Trinity.
Where,
sorry, not the Holy. It's Trinity. It's Trinity Cathedral. Yeah, Holy Trinity Cathedral. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
So next to Trinity College is the National Museum of Ireland, is where you can see all those finds, and you need to go up to the 2nd floor. So when you go in there, you'll see the Golden Age of the Bronze Age and all those Celtic finds. The first thing you'll see. So that's all the Bronze Age finds. You need to keep going, walk straight, and you take the right. So the right stairs, these big, beautiful stairs. You're taking the right side. That will bring you up to the early medieval Viking Age finds. Keep walking down, and then you'll bump into the late medieval finds. It's not as big as it should be, but there it is. And then if you keep walking past that again, for some reason, you're going from Viking Age to late medieval period, and then to the Golden Age of Ireland. That's how they have it organized. And I'm like, this is so like all over the place, but I don't know who organized that. I think maybe everyone just gets thrown in space, and that's that. So you're going from the Bronze Age to the Viking Age to the blasted late medieval period, and then to the Golden Age of Ireland, back into the early medieval period again. So yeah, it is what it is. And on top of that as well, for some strange reason, they have it like, so the Dublin finds are all in its own little space. And then you'll find some of the Viking Age finds to do with more Gaelic Ireland, in with the, what was it called? The early medieval period as well. So the finds are all over the place as well.
They're all over the place. And they don't.
Go on.
The other thing is that there's so many finds that aren't on display.
Yes.
Right. This is the problem, that there are so many finds that they can't afford to display or they can't because of the state of the garment. And many of these have not been published. They've maybe in some cases haven't even been examined. So that's another reason we really need to reach out to the museums and just the curators and say, hey, what can you tell us about the medieval finds in your textile finds or leather finds in your collection? Right. Because the Irish museums just have not really, it doesn't seem they've caught up to the trend of almost every other museum in the developed world digitizing their collections. So yeah, we need to make some phone calls,
Yeah,
which is a
we'll see.
metaphor for reach out in some communication method.
We'll see what we can do for sure.
Yeah.
What was it called? We still have another 2 minutes there before we finish up, so I'll cover any more questions.
Yeah.
Gammonsen, what is a gammonsen? A
Oh,
gammonsen
right.
is basically a padded, because we were talking about the
We
under
were.
tunic, which is the lena, the over tunic, which is, in the 10th century was just a woolen lena. Obviously, it gets more advanced in the 15th century. And then over that again, if you're talking about the 10th century, what was it called? Rachel can expand on that for the 15th century. But for the 10th century, the gammonsen is it's basically a whole load of padding put together. And it's basically bulked up until it gets to a point where stabbing and slashing becomes very difficult to penetrate and cut the person
Mm.
open. So everyone imagines that people were wearing a lot of leather back in the 10th century. That's not the case at all. We can't find anything to back that up. There's a little bit of talk about it in the Tom Bakuli about somebody putting on leather over themselves and stuff, but it's very,
Right.
very, very debatable. And we don't know
Very
how that
debatable.
looked.
Yeah.
But we do suddenly know that people were putting padding on, which is gammonsen on. And so they put it, and it's so easy to make. It's 1,000 times easier than making leather armor
Oh, yeah.
is padded armor. So they were definitely putting padding armor on. What was it called? Over their over tunic. And somebody else was talking about it being insanely hot. Yeah, it gets very unbreathable. If you're fighting basically for after 10 minutes, it does get very, very hot under the gammonsen.
Yeah.
So I definitely would agree for that for sure.
Yeah, it does.
Rachel can
And
easily expand on the
the
15th
the
century
other
one.
problem is that a lot of, I mean, the 15th, it's all the same. It's a
Yeah.
padded arming garment that is designed to prevent stabbing wounds and also designed to disperse the shock from mass weapons.
Mm.
Right? Like that's part of the idea is that if someone hits you with a poleaxe, that the shock is actually kind of, distort dispersed by this padded garment so that it doesn't just all hit you in place, thereby crushing your pelvis, for instance. But part of the problem with the unbreathability of gambesons these days is that a lot of people have gambesons that are padded with padding that has been heat treated or that has been chemically treated to be flame retardant, and that makes it less breathable. So even though it's 100% cotton, there's like 2% flame retardant chemicals that have been added, or it's been heat treated or heat fused, and so it's no longer as breathable as it once was. So that is part of the problem with gambesons these days, is that we're using materials that, even though they're natural, they aren't entirely natural, actually.
Yeah.
Or worse yet, they bought it commercially and it's been stuffed with polyfill instead of right.
I've seen that.
God. I mean, but even still, yes, absolutely, it does get hot. And there's, as someone who has supported many men at arms in her lifetime, there is very little more unpleasant than being in front of a man at arms or woman at arms when they open up their gambeson and that moist heat rushes out.
Lovely
and
stuff.
It's like there's such a pressure change from the temperature discrepancy between the air and their body that like it creates a malodorous wet wind from their body. Oh, it's awful.
Oh, tell me about it. Anyway, we'll start finishing up there as you guys are all popping off there to go off to bed, or some of you guys are just coming back. But other than that, we'll start to finish up there, lads. Thanks very much for all the support. I'll be back live again on Saturday night. Sadly, as you guys were saying there and giving your condolences over to Owen O'Neill, whose mother passed away from cancer last week.
Oh, God, I am sorry to hear that.
Owen,
poor Owen.
I've been talking to Owen and he said he'll see how he feels on the Saturday. There's no rush for Owen to come back, and I think we all feel like that as well. So we'll see if Dr. Owen O'Neill feels like coming back on, see how he is emotionally and stuff. He's still very sad about it, and rightfully so. We only have one mother, and we should definitely look after her for sure. But other than that, guys, and also then on the Sunday night, I'll be over on my Patreon as well, where we'll cover the reasoning for the start of the Scottish War of Independence. So if you're into the Scottish War of Independence, definitely head on over to my Patreon at Irish Medieval History. Give an old nosy, or if you just want to support the channel, you can do so as well. Other than that, guys, I think that's all I have for you for today. So I'll see you guys next week on Wednesday. A little bit later, perhaps. We'll see what we can do. But other than that, thanks very much, and slán go bhaile. I see
Oh,
when I see you guys.
Philip, wait, I still have to
What?
do my thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. Bye, guys. See you. See you, Rachel. Go on.
Yeah. So I just wanted to thank my channel members and my patrons on Patreon and my Facebook subscribers for supporting my work in researching, recreating, and sharing daily life from the Middle Ages. I appreciate you all. I thank everyone who gave super chats or gems or jewels or whatever those cute little tips are called on YouTube. I appreciate all the support. I appreciate all of you who are just here today with us on during our live streams, asking these great questions and also having a fun little chat off in the side in the live stream. Because Philip, I love it when you and I are holding forth about something and our people are in our community just chatting amongst themselves in a really nice manner. I think that's really,
Yeah.
it's a great environment, right?
Yes, it is.
So yeah, I thank you all. Remember, everyone, if you've been enjoying, we keep forgetting to say this midstream, Philip, double tap the screen to like and
Oh yeah, definitely.
subscribe to both the Creative Contessa and to Irish Medieval History. Otherwise, I hope to see you all at any of the upcoming live streams that I have planned for the weekend. Until next time, everyone, stay creative.
See you when I see you. Slán go bhaile.